Vance are also dead. This is the 10th attack in Jammu and Kashmir just in the last month and a half or so. Most of these attacks are now happening in the Jammu, Poonch, Rajouri, Doda regions, which is south of the Pir Panjal. There are fewer attacks in the Kashmir Valley, perhaps because of the heightened security there in the aftermath of the abrogation of Article 370. Is Jammu now fast becoming the new terror battleground? Are these repeated attacks, particularly in the last month and a half, proof of both an intelligence failure and an operational failure? Who should be held accountable for that? And the most important question, as directed by the Supreme Court of India, can elections be held before the 30th of September, and that too in the shadow of this terror?
ये डेंस फॉरेस्ट है और घना जंगल है। ये जो एरिया है वो बहुत बड़ा है और ये इंटरकनेक्टेड है, यानी कि अगर कठुआ से कोई अगर इन्फिल्ट्रेशन करता है, घुसपैठ करता है, तो वो वहाँ से होता हुआ डूडू, बसंतगढ़, उधमपुर के बाद और वो इस इलाके तक पहुँच सकता है।
अफसोस ये है कि there is no accountability. By now the head should have rolled. The DG should have been sacked by now. और जो इस वक्त के DG हैं, he is more, busy with fixing things politically.
आतंकियों के हौसले बुलंद हैं और वो जम्मू रीजन में आए और सीधे हमारे सेना पर हमला करते और मोदी जी इटली और रूस में शांति।
There is overwhelming evidence to show that many had honed the art of running with the hare and hunting with the hound to near signs that left both the common men and the security men bewildered, frightened and confused.
All right, now what is particularly new and also worrisome at the same time is that since early June, there's been a sharp spike in terror activity in what has been relatively the peaceful region of Jammu. On the 9th of June, 9 people were killed and 41 injured when terrorists attacked pilgrims who were going to a temple in Riyasi, that is again south of Pir Panjal. A couple of days after that, between the 11th and 12th of June, 6 soldiers were injured in twin terror attacks that happened in Doda and in Gando. Then on the 26th of June, towards the end of that month, 3 Jaish terrorists were gunned down in the Doda district. On the 7th of July, army personnel were injured after terrorists attacked an army checkpost in Rajouri. On the 8th of July, 5 soldiers were killed after terrorists attacked a convoy in Kathua. On the 15th of July, again, 5 security personnel killed in Doda, and the hunt is on for the terrorists right now. So the point is, clearly something has changed. The attacks which used to happen by and large north of the Pir Panjal in Kashmir for many years and decades has now in the last year or so, certainly in the last 6 months, has shifted south of Pir Panjal. Much more attacks are now happening in the Jammu, Poonch, Rajouri, Doda sectors as opposed to what is happening in Kashmir. The million-dollar question now is, A, what has led to this? How are these not being detected? How are these not being prevented? And operationally, why is it taking so long to neutralize these terrorists? Why is there this sudden spurt of terrorist incidents? And the most important question, which is a political question, which will have to be answered before the 30th of September, which is the mandated deadline by the Supreme Court for holding elections in Jammu and Kashmir, can it happen in the shadow of this spike in terror? Aras Patania is leader of the BJP. He's now joining us. Mahima Singh, spokesperson of the Congress Party. Muzaffar Iqbal Khan, leader of the National Conference. Lalit Ambardar is a Kashmiri activist. And Colonel Dini, retired, is a defense expert. Let me start with you. All right, we'll try and go across to the political guest. But I want to first start with Colonel Dini. If you could explain to our viewers why this recent spurt of violence that we're seeing is something that we haven't seen before. Jammu was relatively much more peaceful compared to Kashmir. A, why is this happening? And B, how does one stop this?
Zaka, as you rightly mentioned in your introduction, that since last 6 months or so, we have seen the spurt of violence, especially south of Pir Panjal. And one of the reasons which we all know is that, honestly speaking, Zaka, Pakistan does not have any option but to resort to, actions south of Pir Panjal, because in Kashmir Valley, the anti-terrorist activities or the anti-terrorist grid is so strong that virtually it has become impossible for the terrorists to carry out their operations there. So that is what we had seen over the last few years, that the level of violence had come down. Even the stone pelting incidents have come down, and things were going into normalcy at a very rapid pace. So Pakistan had to calibrate their activities in such a manner that they wanted to make this to be seen in the world that Kashmir issue is still alive. So
Okay.
what best option next which they have is to carry out the operations down south, especially in this Jammu, Doda, and this area where the terrain relatively is much more easier for infiltration. And we have seen this, about 20 years back or 15 years back, these areas where there were militancy, there were terrorism which happened. And that is why these Rashtriya Rifles units were there, but we had overcome them in a great manner. So now what has happened is that this particular terrain issue, along with what also happens is, Zaka, that over a period of time, when you do not have actual operations going on, your intelligence setup also loosens a bit. It takes time. When you're doing actual operations, you're fast, you're on your toes all the time. So what happens is that probably because of this lack of operations happening in this particular area, the tactical intelligence which is coming, like what happens now in Kashmir, that I think is not happening in this south of Pir Panjal. And that is why more or less we are going back to the 90s, wherein the jungle bashing used to be the operation which used that they used to have a generic information that there is a group of terrorists in this particular area of a forest.
Okay.
And the army used to launch, and in that the casualties used to be huge. That used to happen in early 90s when our unit and all used to be there. So I think that is what is happening here.
So in a sense, you're saying we're going back to the tumultuous days of the early 90s. R.S. Pathania is now joining us of the BJP. Mr. Pathania, 10 attacks have taken place in the last month and a half in Jammu. Many of them, like I said, are in the Jammu region. On the 9th of June in Riyasi, in the 11th of June in Kathua, in the 11th of June in Doda, Chattargala, 11th of June in Udhampur, 12th of June in Doda, 27th of June in Doda, 8th of July in Kathua, and now the latest attack which has happened on the 15th of July in Doda. Colonel Dini was saying that the terrorists are changing their tactics, far fewer attacks happening now in Kashmir, much more in Jammu. He's saying we're perhaps returning back to the tumultuous and violent days of the 1990s.
Yes, Jacob, first of all, a very good evening to everybody on board. So, as Colonel Saab has rightly pointed it out, it is as good as an English adage, the wolf is changing its spots. But one thing very clear and very categorical remains, that after 2014 and particularly after 5th of August 2019, there has been a considerable decline in terrorist activities in Jammu and Kashmir. This is not only what Bharatiya Janata Party says, this is not only what central government says, this is what the international agencies and experts, while judging Jammu Kashmir on various parameters which govern the upsurge and the prevalence of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, they would say one aspect. Secondly, I very, very honestly admit the existence and the vulnerability of security forces and the citizens in the territory of, in the militancy-born territory of Jammu and Kashmir, one part, and the changed tactics of the Pakistan and the promoters and propagators of terrorism sitting across the border. They first choked to that hybrid terrorism. Now, as the Director General of Police has pointed out, they infiltrate from from Punjab and Haryana borders, and they ultimately then they sneak into the Jammu and Kashmir territory. But I don't want to shirk away from our duty and from our honors from protecting the lives and limbs of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. This is a new challenge. This is a gauntlet which has been thrown before the security forces, before the armed forces, and I'm fully confident that the security forces,
Mr.
the security
before I go to your
Jammu and
Congress
Kashmir, they will be able.
Two
they
questions.
will be able to do the goods in
One
Jammu and
is,
Kashmir. Please.
you have been saying consistently that since Article 370 was abrogated, violence has come
Please.
down. In the last 2
Absolutely.
months, certainly violence doesn't seem to have come down. So what explains that? And two, you have a bigger problem, which is in the next 2 months, you have to revert back to the Supreme Court and tell them when you can conduct elections. The Supreme Court has given you a deadline of September 30th to conduct the assembly elections. Do you believe, given the level of attacks we are seeing in Jammu, that assembly elections can take place in this shadow of terror?
Sir, Bharatiya Janata Party is for full prevalence of democracy in all forms, which includes the legislative elections in Jammu and Kashmir. Bharatiya Janata Party has made it stand very clear on each and every occasion. So the election system and the election paraphernalia, they have also geared up in Jammu and Kashmir. The short summary revision is going on, the relocation of polling stations is going on, and more so, the election staff, the security staff, they have also done a series of meetings in Jammu and Kashmir. I am hopeful we'll be able to not to overshoot the deadline of 30th of September, one part. Secondly, so far as your question is, I have a very, very humble submission to each and everybody on board and all the political players, sir. Terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir has been an offshoot and offspring of an irresponsible neighbor sitting in our immediate neighborhood, and which has been who's given to the habit of creating cudgels at the drop of a hat. So it is too sensitive an issue to play politics over. Let's be constructive, let's be pragmatic, let's be cooperative, and let's have full faith in the valor and in the acumen, and particularly in the professionalism of security forces in Jammu and Kashmir. We should trust them. You may not trust Narendra Modi, you may not trust Bharatiya Janata Party, but we should trust, and we should at least encourage the security forces fighting against all odds in Jammu and Kashmir.
Please respond to that. What Mr. Patania is saying is that you don't have to trust Mr. Modi or the government or the BJP, but certainly trust the
because
forces.
They hate Modi, na?
Yeah,
they may not trust him.
Let the forces do their job. It's very clear, as what Colonel Dini was also saying a moment ago, that because there is so much security presence and a changed almost situation on the ground in Kashmir, in the last few years. That's why the terrorists are changing their tactics and now targeting the Jammu region. This is happening at the behest of a neighbor which has only ill will for us, and therefore trying to play politics, like Mehbooba Mufti, for example, doing today, is only going to undermine that effort of the security forces. Please respond, ma'am.
Jai Hind. Zaka, in fact, it is a very critical question, and the acts that have hit the state of Jammu and Kashmir over the past, especially 36 days, and I would say rather over the past 32 months, is beyond condemnable, as our national president has also reiterated that there is no place for this kind of terrorism, and we totally stand against it together. But PM Modi and his cabinet has been living in denial. They have been projecting normalcy when the situation in Jammu and Kashmir has been anything but normal through and through. The BJP spokespersons come on your panels and project lies. But if you hear the father, retired Colonel Bhuvanesh Thapa, of one of the major ranks officers who has martyred, who has paid for the denial of this government in their policies with his life, you would realize what he's saying. Retired Colonel Bhuvanesh Thapa says, Zaka, that the government should have curtailed the support base of militants in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and he has himself served in the state of Jammu and Kashmir in the past. The BJP spokesperson is very conveniently talking about consensus, about coming together today, just like the Prime Minister chooses to very conveniently stay silent. It's been 36 days that this kind of terrorism has hit Jammu and Kashmir vigorously, and it's been 38 days of this newly elected fractured government. But the policies of this government have been fractured, like the fractured mandate, and the Prime Minister actually has not only owned up, has not only taken any accountability, rather continues to stay silent. Today they're talking about consensus. Today they are talking about coming together as one force, which our national president, Mr. Kharge, has also said that against this kind of terrorism, we need to stand up against this terrorism like a country, like a united force. But where was this consensus when they were passing the Agniveer scheme? Why were the stakeholders not taken on board? Where was this consensus when they were abrogating the Article 370? I think many in their own government, many in their own cabinet were also not aware what was going to happen on the floor of the parliament that day. Where was this consensus when the authorities were asked to stay mum on Pulwama, which was later revealed by the former governor of the state last year? Mr. Satyapal Malik, brought it to the light before the whole nation, how the country was, how our Jawans were betrayed in broad daylight by the sitting government that chooses to conveniently
Okay.
project a false bravado to cover up its misdoings
So let
against
me
the
ask
nation and
Lalit
national
Ambardar,
security.
is this false bravado, or is it, as the DGP of the state has said, that there are certain political elements who for a number of years have been giving legs and fanning oxygen to this kind of terror apparatus, whether it is done directly or covertly through OGWs, etc. The contention of the security agencies, and this is what has been articulated by the DGP, is that as long as that political oxygen continues to exist and survive and thrive in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, you're never going to put an end to terrorism. While that may be a larger existential question, the more immediate question that needs to be asked, Lalit Ambardar, is who should take accountability for this deteriorating security situation, particularly in Jammu?
Zaka, first of all, I follow jihad conflicts that are happening globally. I don't consider this as ordinary terror attacks. These are acts of war. You have the ratio of fallen soldiers is to the terrorists is 1 to 2. I'm losing 2 soldiers against 1 jihadist. So and the audacity. They ambush a petrol vehicle, army petrol vehicle, the mightiest, one of the mightiest armies in the world. They have the audacity to attack us from the French. And it's not happening for the first time. It has been happening there for the past 32 years, ever since the advent of pan-Islamism-inspired Kashmir Jihad. Now, what are we doing now? First of all, let me tell you, this south of Tir Panjal, I only hope and pray that North Bloc is taking it seriously, in the sense that let's not get, this could be a ploy. Let's not get involved in Rajouri, Poonch, Kathua, and Kishtwar or Doda. I'm afraid the National Highway, the railway bridge that's going to be inaugurated very soon across Chenab, and Amarnath Yatra. We ought to be very, very careful. I would urge through you to the Government of India to take note of that. Number two, you see what happened on 5th of August 2019. You began the process of dismantling of an Islamo-fascistic ecosystem that was prevailing in Kashmir by virtue of Article 370. It's no panache against Kashmir Jihad. Kashmir Jihad is a military problem. And what DGP today, I salute the bravery of the DGP, who Director General of Police, who has talked about the civil society. I think he was very modest. You have to talk about the so-called mainstream of Kashmir is the original Islamist polity of Kashmir. You have National Conference representative here. I don't want to talk about politics. I want to talk about what is fueling, what is supporting, the terrorists do not, the jihadis do not stay in jungles always. In Kashmir Valley particularly, they stay in neighborhoods. They come out, kill, and go back to another house. You have seen recently the visuals of that bunker, that hideout, which was not temporary hideout. In Kulgam, you saw on the television, the hideout was constructed by the owner of the house. It was a permanent structure. That is how the local society, what DGP was alluding to, is the jihadization of the local society. It's a full support. And I'm glad the Congress representative has quoted the colonel, the father, the martyr, that Government of India should dismantle the support structure to the jihad. And the support structure is very important. That's very crucial. And that's coming from the local society, local civil society, local politics.
So
Number one, National Conference.
Muzaffar Iqbal Khan of the NC is there, so let him respond to that.
I want to bring out,
because even though the DGP
what?
did not take names today, I think the PDP leader, former Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti, came out and said that it's a question of accountability, DGP must be sacked, so on and so forth. The contention of the security forces, Mr. Khan, is you can have whatever level of security, intelligence, surveillance, etc., but if you're going to have elements within civil society, within mainstream parties encouraging this kind of a quasi-political terror ecosystem, then you won't be able to curtail it. Mr. Khan.
Zaka, I don't think that any mainstream political party ever have supported any such subversive or violent activities. All political parties, which are the mainstream political parties, they are the victim of the terrorism for last 30 years. Every political party has offered blood for it. And you know, these political parties, they fought last-ditch battle since 1996 when the democratic government came into being. They fought the last-ditch battle to restore normalcy, to restore democracy, to restore rule of law. Otherwise, there is no doubt in it that, as Colonel Saab has said, Colonel Dini has said that some 2 decades back, all these areas were badly affected by the terrorism. There is no doubt in it. But we succeeded in eradicating it with the help of the locals, be it in Kashmir or be it in Jammu, in Rajouri, Poonch, Doda, Bhadarwah. This support was provided, unstinted support was provided by the locals to eradicate the infrastructure, even the system which was developed by RR, then police, local police. But there is something lacking somewhere. I must tell you, I cannot say that we have never claimed, even in the past when the political parties were in power, that there is a complete normalcy. But we fought it. I'm not naming any political party, but all political party. I respectfully disagree with the chief, police chief here, who ought not to have given any political statement because it is a political statement.
No, but Mr. Khan, aside of naming any parties, please tell me in Riyasi, for example, which is what started off this latest cycle of violence, there are newspaper reports now showing that the terrorists, after killing the pilgrims who were going to a temple, caught up with a local there, I think he was a shepherd or a grazer there, paid him money, and then he managed to give them cover back into the forest. This is a matter of record. It's all over the press. These are stories have been reported on this.
Zaka, I don't rule out any such thing because it is possible. Either he may have paid him money or he may have threatened him or whatever. But there is, as by and large, you will see that in Jammu province, we don't have that ecosystem here. I am also from Jammu. I am from Rajouri. But we don't have any ecosystem supporting these type of terror activities.
So then why has this sudden spike happened in Jammu?
Spike, there may be a change in modus operandi of the terrorist activities from across the border because there is no one local here. You must have heard it that those who were killed here, all of them are foreigners.
Foreign terrorists.
They're from Pakistan.
Okay.
So you don't find, but still, I'll say you raised another question that election. When in 1996 the elections were held, the militancy was at its peak. And there was nobody ready to contest the election. The central government, as well as the political parties here, they requested the candidates to contest the election who were afraid that they will be killed. And nobody is safe even today. So making false claims that abrogation of Article 370 has eradicated the militancy, the terrorism from Jammu and Kashmir is totally fallacious.
Let me ask Mr. Patania, and then Lalit also is putting his hand up. Two things, Mr. Patania. If a large majority of the terrorists who have been killed in this latest cycle of violence are foreign terrorists, then what about your claims that you have fenced the international border, your claims that after abrogation of 370, terrorism has come down, etc.? It flies in the face, number one. And the second point that he made, that even in 1996, there were candidates refusing to come and take part in the elections. They were fearing for their life. He says it's a similar situation now. No matter what you say, that normalcy has returned, etc., no one wants to contest the upcoming elections. That's what the NC spokesperson is saying.
No.
Mr. Jacob, I don't want to.
I'm not saying.
The atmosphere is such. The violence is such.
I don't want to enter into an unusual debate with my friend from National Conference. Every political party has tried its own level best to counter militancy in Jammu and Kashmir. But our standpoint remains that there were two categories of militancies. One was permissible terrorism, one was impermissible terrorism. So for the first time, there's a government which means business, which said zero tolerance against terrorism, which is all out. The government employees, the black sheep within the press and the media fraternity, the separatist leadership, they all have been taken hammer and tongs by the Bharat Sarkar simply to ensure a safe, a peaceful, environment and ecosystem for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So this harshness, this strictness, this might have irked, this might have perturbed a few people, but this is virtually for the safety of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. One very simple corollary which comes out from the statement of Director General of Police, Mr. R.R. Swain, that the political parties, he has not named any political party, they are responsible for bringing militancy in the civil society of Jammu and Kashmir. He has accused them of running with hares and hunting with hounds because, number one, he has said that politicians going to the funerals of militants, politicians going to the houses of militants to condole their deaths, politicians publicly saying that Mr. Burhan Wani is a martyr. They are directly saying Afzal Guru, the main architect of the parliament attack, he's again a martyr. They are enforcing a Kashmir Bandh while he was executed in Kashmir. So this thing needs to be done. One thing, the politicians across Jammu and Kashmir should understand that terrorism means terrorism. Terrorism means bad terrorism. We need to be concerted.
So Maima Singh, please respond. How do you curtail all this terror, this spurt in violence, if there is a certain section, even within mainstream parties, who try to eulogize terrorists? Yes. It happened in the case of Burhan Wani.
Yes, they called him a martyr.
Yeah.
Your India Alliance partners
let her respond, yeah.
Please, ma'am, please.
Complacency is the word, Zaka. Complacency is the word with which the BJP spokesperson speaks of permissible terrorism. Maybe that is a concept for the BJP and its leaders. That has never been a concept for any other party. You see, we have not seen elections in the state of Jammu and Kashmir for the last 10 years, and now with the intervention of the Honorable Supreme Court, maybe they will happen this year. But we have seen how the hindrances were caused to a bar election being conducted. In a state where a bar election cannot be conducted, where the advocates are incarcerated for going for the election, where humiliation, harassment happens to the people of the state simply for asking for their rights and simply for walking out free. There's been a lot of capping of human rights in that state. But the BJP spokesperson, speaks with utmost brazenness when he says there is permissible terrorism and then there is non-permissible terrorism. I think when Pandit Nehru dealt with the situation, when the former prime ministers of the country dealt with the situation, any prime minister, I think we all were dealing with the terrorism with the most stringent possible measures, not categorizing it as permissible or impermissible.
I'm running out of time. Lalit, last minute. I have to wrap up after this.
See, what I want to tell you is, we do not seem to be taking into cognizance what we have on hand. Neither the North Bloc, nor the polity, nor the ruling establishment. We are trying to say that, I repeat, 5th of August 2019 was a momentous day. Narendra Modi showed the political spine and dismantled, abrogated the articles.
Jammu and Kashmir.
Sir, 1 second, please. Let him finish, please. Thank you. Let him finish, please. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Lalit.
You cannot fight Kashmir Jihad by stating the tourist arrival in Kashmir. You cannot counter Kashmir Jihad by stating developmental figures in Kashmir. I tell you, in Kabul, Russians were there for 10 years. After that, Americans were there for 20 years. We Indians invested in Afghanistan. We constructed their parliament. In the same parliament, now the Taliban, by the way, the Taliban's arrival was welcomed by National Conference and the PDP leadership in Kashmir. And also, I tell you, the Congress representative, she doesn't seem to be aware of Bar Council of Kashmir. They have a charter. Kashmir issue is in the charter of Bar Council of Kashmir. They are all pro-Pakistan.
That's a different debate. I'm afraid I'm completely out of time tonight. We'll see how this story plays out. But clearly, the onus is on the security forces, the law establishment there, because they have to A, curtail this violence, and B, more importantly, create the grounds for the safe, free and fair conduct of elections, as has been mandated by the Supreme Court to be concluded before the 30th of September. Meanwhile, let's move on to the other big story that we're tracking after the shocking assassination attempt in Pennsylvania on Donald Trump. He's now moving ahead with his campaign. At the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Trump announced his vice presidential pick as Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. once a Trump critic. He even called the former president an idiot, reprehensible, opium for the masses. Cultural opium is what he said. J.D. Vance has now fully adopted Trump's populist agenda, even showing up outside the courtrooms where Trump was being tried in the run-up to the nomination. Now there is an interesting India connect that J.D. Vance has. His wife and one of the main forces behind his campaign, Usha Vance, is the daughter of Indian immigrants. Former US President Donald Trump has chosen Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio to be his running mate. This is a bet that Trump has taken that the young senator will bring in fresh energy to the Republican ticket. But it's also a signal to his Republican base to ensure that the movement which he began a decade ago to make America great again can live on even after him. By choosing Vance, Trump is making him his de facto successor. Vance is just 39 years old. He's a political newcomer who entered the US Senate just last year. But in the year that he's been a public representative, he's established himself as a devout loyalist of Trump. He often echoes the former president's stand on various issues. But J.D. Vance was not always like this. He started off as an acerbic Trump critic. He once referred to Trump as reprehensible. He even called him cultural heroin. There is even a private message that Vance sent to a friend where he compared Trump as America's Hitler. But when he decided to run for the Senate in 2022, he won Trump's backing. That endorsement from Trump lifted Vance above a crowded field in his home state of Ohio. Vance was once a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley who became best known for writing his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. Vance quickly emerged as a top defender of the former president, both in the halls of Congress as well as on television. Trump announced his VP choice in a post on the social media platform Truth Social as the Republican National Convention got underway in Milwaukee in Wisconsin. He said that J.D. Vance was the best person suited to be his potential vice president. He highlighted Vance's time in the Marine Corps and his memoir, saying that he believed that Vance has been a champion for hardworking people, particularly workers and farmers in a number of key swing states, including Vance's home state of Ohio. Later, Trump appeared at the convention with a bandage on his ear. This was the first public appearance after the Saturday assassination attempt. He stood side by side with Vance, even as people were speaking around them. In the aftermath of Saturday's assassination attempt on Trump, J.D. Vance went further than many others did. He directly attributed the shooting to the rhetoric that was used by President Biden and his campaign. He said that the president was directly responsible for the poisoned rhetoric which eventually led to the shooting at Trump. In Vance, Trump has tapped into an ambitious ideologue who relishes the spotlight and who has already shown that he can energize donors on behalf of Trump. His youth is a big plus point. He's under 40 years old, and there's nearly 40 years separating him and Trump. Vance is the first millennial who's been nominated to a major party ticket. He could prove a boon to the ticket, as voters have expressed concern over both Trump and Biden's advancing ages. On a funny side note, in the modern era, he's also the first man on a major party's ticket who happens to have facial hair. But more importantly, the choice by Donald Trump positions J.D. Vance as the likeliest Republican to carry forth Trump's ideological legacy beyond a second White House term. Vance is also said to be very close to Don Jr., Trump's son, which helped him secure the ticket. J.D. Vance shot to the national spotlight after the publication of his 2016 memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. It was a story of a young boy growing up poor in Ohio and in Kentucky. He talks about his travels with a mother who was a drug addict and being brought up by his grandparents in Middletown, Ohio. The timing of his book was around the time of Trump's political rise. Vance became sought out for his perspective on what was fueling Trump's popularity among the white working-class voters. Raised largely by his maternal grandparents, Vance, whose mother battled drug addiction, grew up in Middletown. It was a steel mill town which saw its fortunes decline as blue-collar jobs disappeared. After enlisting in the US Marines in the early 2000s and doing public affairs work in Iraq, Vance graduated summa cum laude from The Ohio State University. He then went on to Yale Law School. That's where he met his wife, Usha Chilikuri, and the couple now have 3 children. After some time working in corporate law, Vance went to San Francisco, where he worked as a venture capitalist for Peter Thiel, who's a well-known conservative donor who's also influenced Vance's politics. Thiel donated millions of dollars to Vance and helped him in his first Senate race. Vance has also spoken about how his wife's family, which has deeply religious Hindu roots, has helped him rediscover his own faith. Vance, who was born a Protestant, was not much of a religious person until he converted to Catholicism as an adult, just before his political plunge. Chilikuri, his wife, also has an impeccable academic record, having graduated from Yale and then she went to Cambridge University. She also worked with one of the top San Francisco law firms before clerking for Supreme Court Justices John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh. Vance has rooted his career in speaking for the working class against the elites. But how voters may now perceive him after he's fully aligned with Trump, who happens to be a billionaire, is a big question mark. Also, while Trump and the Republicans are seeking to expand the MAGA base, particularly among college-educated suburban voters, particularly women, Vance's comments on issues like abortion may not exactly make him popular, particularly among the moderate and independent voters. Vance was in favor of a federal abortion ban, but he has since toned down his position to match that of Trump's. Vance has relatively very little governance experience. Like I said, he's been senator for barely over a year. He has never directly competed against Trump in the primaries. His political career basically exemplifies his devotion to Trump and how that has almost become the clincher for why he was chosen over other contenders like Marco Rubio and Doug Burgum. Vance is part of a group of a roughly dozen Republican senators who have tried to push the Senate towards Trump's MAGA ideology. And that has serious consequences, particularly with his isolationist views on foreign policy. In fact, Vance clashed pretty unsuccessfully with Mitch McConnell, who's the Senate Majority Leader, to block a $60 billion foreign aid package to Ukraine. He said the only way to end the war between Russia and Ukraine was for Ukraine to concede territory to Russia and come to the negotiating table. But in the other war, which is the one between Israel and Hamas, Vance voted for providing a $14 billion weapons package to Israel. Now, how he distinguishes on the moral question of both wars, which resulted him in voting differently, that has still not been fully explained. During his frequent television interviews and on the campaign trail for Trump, Vance has pretty much echoed the former president's hardline views when it comes to immigration, protectionism on trade matters. In sum, J.D. Vance becomes the perfect ally and perhaps an echo chamber to take Trump's message across, except to a much younger audience, which Trump is hoping to reach to before the November election. All right, so what does the addition of J.D. Vance at the top of the Republican ticket to join Donald Trump as his running mate, potentially the next vice president of the United States, what does that mean, particularly his India connection? I'm now joined by Mr. Shalabh Kumar. He's an American industrialist, of course, the person who came up with the slogan Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar, and the founder of the Republican Hindu Coalition for Trump. But let me start, first of all, before we come to the Vance question, Mr. Kumar, I want to ask you about what happened on Saturday, the assassination attempt on the former president. Where were you when you first got news that there was this hit on Donald Trump, and then when you saw the images of him standing up, bloodstains on his face, rising his fist up in the air and chanting to his supporters to fight? What was going through your mind when you saw those images first?
Well, it was kind of hard to believe what we were seeing on television. I was watching the rally on Fox News. I was in Chicago, and just watching the rally, and all of a sudden this thing happens. It was kind of surreal. It's like what the heck it is. But within 30 seconds, Man of Steel got up and says, "Fight on, fight on, fight on." Initially, it was difficult to believe. Maybe it was some firecrackers, a lot of people thought, or some kind of a joke or something happened. But when he got up with blood coming out of his ears, right ear, that this was an assassination attempt. So, but right after he got up and he asked for his shoes, so it became pretty apparent that you could tell from his voice that he was just fine. And then, of course, then when he says, "Fight on," and then raises his fist, and he did that several times. So.
Why do you think, politically speaking, this might be potentially a game-changing moment in this election, in this race?
Well, two things. One is, Americans, we generally have a short memory for people who are not really tuned into political dialogue all the time. So they will contrast this moment with how President Biden looked like at the debate. So just compare the contrast. The contrast is just unbelievable. It's a very energetic 78-year-old and versus an 81-year-old who doesn't know where he's at, and he's just kind of seems dumbfounded. And here, he doesn't look like a 78-year-old. He looks like somebody in his early 60s or something, with that much energy and that much fight in him. And the contrast couldn't be bigger.
I do want to ask you about now J.D. Vance and his candidature as the running mate for Donald Trump. What does this mean? What would you attribute the ticket, the Trump-Vance ticket? What is it that tipped the vice presidential sort of ticket in favor of J.D. Vance? What does he stand for? There are a lot of people who are saying that he's perhaps even further right in the political lexicon, even further right of Trump on issues like immigration and abortion, etc.
I don't think so. I think media likes to lay out put up certain titles to him. I think he is a conservative, a modern conservative, a young conservative, 39 years old. That played a significant role in his favor. Second, he is from neighboring states to Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, and that's a battleground state. That's where the election is going to boil down to. But right now, I have been in politics now for over 40 years. Unless the Democrats do something drastically different, the election is over.
I do want to ask you about Vance's India connection. His wife is Indian American. She's a person of Indian origin. Her parents came to America as immigrants. She, of course, studied at Yale Law. That's where she met J.D. Vance. What do we know about his India connection? And do you think this will come in good stead if and when Trump becomes president and Vance becomes his vice president in the India-U.S. relationship?
Absolutely. And she's a very, very smart person and a big influence on JD, and always on his side, as she has declared in many interviews, and JD has. There's quite a popular photo of the two getting married. Mm-hmm. And he is with his tilak and Indian kurta, and she's in her Indian dress. And, that's just the Hindu American community and the Indian American community is very excited that, it's not just second lady this time, but we'll be all looking for her to be the first lady after 2028 because they're so young. I mean, it's a phenomenal decision. We are very happy.
What does the rise of Indian Americans in American politics tell you? I mean, you have Kamala Harris, the first woman of color to be vice president. She's of, again, Indian origin. Her mother was of Indian origin. And now you have J.D. Vance, who could potentially be the next vice president. He's married to an Indian American. What does that say to you? And we have a number of Indian American congressmen and women and so on. What does that say to you about the Indian American community and their sort of rise in American politics over the last few years?
First of all, let me just kind of correct you a little bit. All these people you're talking about, they are Hindu Americans. I am a Hindu American. I mean, not every Indian is a Hindu, and not every Hindu is an Indian, because there are Hindus from all over the world besides India. So anyway, but that is just a little correction. But I've seen I came to the country when there were less than 100,000 total Hindu Americans, Indian Americans in the country, and there were stereotypes of the Indian American community, students mostly at that time, just getting out of colleges, very smart mathematically, but not too practical. Slowly it changed to managers in engineering and other professions. A lot of doctors then came in, and the overall perception kept on changing. And now then you have it has gone to the point where major heads of major Fortune 500 companies, they are Hindu Americans, Indian Americans. So that's just a natural rise, because the Hindu and Indian American community is just very smart. So that's bound to happen. And also the both political parties recognize that in the battleground states, there are, per our database, in the 6 battleground states, there's close to 1.5 million Hindu American voters that decides the elections. So every which way, I don't think the Hindu community, Indian American community, is that strong in fundraising as compared to the Jewish community. Mm-hmm. Jewish community raises more funds, but our numbers are bigger now than even the Jewish community. Right. Jewish community set at about 62% Democrat, 38% Republican. Has been shifting, but the Hindu and Indian American community describes themselves as independents. So if there are that many independents, 1.5 million independents, and they could swing both ways. They could go Democrat, they could go Republican. So it becomes that much more important.
All right, Mr. Shalabh Kumar, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us and putting into perspective what the candidature of J.D. Vance would mean at the top of the Trump ticket. And we'll be in touch with you between now and November when the election is going to be a hotly contested election. And as Mr. Kumar was saying, given the events that we saw on Saturday, I think Donald Trump is just 1 foot away from the presidential door and a possible second term. All right, so let's try and get a better sense of what's happening on the ground. It's day 2 of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin. Ivan Rodriguez is CNN correspondent who's now joining us live from there. Ivan, thank you very much for joining us. Good morning to you. We know that J.D. Vance was named by Donald Trump as his running mate to be the vice presidential nominee from the Republican Party. There's a lot of interest on Vance and his candidature, particularly his India connection, if you will. He's married to an Indian American. Tell us what prompted Trump to nominate Vance as his running mate, and what do we know more about his India connections?
Well, Zaka, first of all, when you look at the reasons why Vance was chosen. One, he really is one of the most loyal and fiercest defenders of the former president, and he has been now for the last couple of years. Secondly, when you look at the path to the White House and you begin to look at the electoral map, most assessments of that map would suggest that President Joe Biden must win at least Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where we are, and then add a single electoral vote in Omaha, Nebraska, in order to get to those 270 necessary electoral votes to then clinch the presidency. So essentially the thought here is that Vance could help Trump close off that path for Biden. And you were talking about Senator Vance's wife, Usha Vance. She actually is a trial lawyer. And she also was a former judicial clerk. She is the daughter of Indian immigrants, grew up in the suburb outside of San Diego. And what's interesting as well is yesterday we actually heard from the firm that Usha Vance used to work with since 2015, and that firm announced that she had already resigned. So full support there from Usha Vance supporting now Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance.
What do we know about his political positions? There is some commentary that if you look at his voting record in the Senate, his public comments on television, on the campaign trail, on issues like abortion and immigration, it seems like he's even further right of Donald Trump. Is that correct?
So I think right now what we're going to be seeing moving forward is him really aligning to the policies of Trump and what the GOP platform is. Again, he is a very strong defender of everything that is Trump and his policies. So when we do look at that GOP platform, which was adopted prior to the start of this convention, and you look at those issues, right? You look at abortion and what the mentions are on that platform itself, and that updated language that they adopted does sort of mirror more of Trump's position in the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, pretty much saying that he's in favor of now the states making that decision on the issue. So the new platform also doesn't mention anything about an abortion ban at the federal level, even though we do see many conservatives wishing that that would have been included. But former President Trump has publicly said that he opposes that. So now in terms of Vance, we can really see him following suit as well.
And one final word, today is day 2 of the convention. What is expected there? Is Vance expected to speak at some point in the next day or so? And also just a quick word on how Trump was received, because it was his first public appearance after the Saturday assassination attempt on him. How was he received at the RNC?
So Vance is expected to speak tomorrow for his first speech. It's going to be a very important speech to hear from him for the first time as that vice presidential pick. We saw him yesterday on the convention floor, as well as former President Trump, who appeared with a bandage over his right ear. And he was received very, very well, as you can imagine, from the people who were very anxious to see him for the first time, the former president, walking in, cheers in the crowd as well, some of them chanting "fight, fight, fight," which is some of the things that Trump shouted as soon as he was able to get back up on his feet after that assassination attempt. So moving forward today, a big focus is going to be on safety. We can expect to hear a little bit more about immigration, crime, law enforcement. So a lot of those speakers will be tailoring to that message. One of those speakers will actually be former GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley, who recently we found out would be attending the convention after hearing reports that she wouldn't be attending.
And especially after last Saturday's incident, I guess the theme of safety acquires a lot more weight and meaning. But thank you very much, Ivan Rodriguez, for joining us live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the venue of the Republican National Convention. That's a wrap from me, Zaka Jacob, and the rest of the team here at Brass Tacks. So if you'd been tuned in, we were coming to you live from the CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime studio. We will be coming back to you tomorrow night at 9 p.m. with another edition of Brass Tacks. We will keep a very, very close eye on what's happening in the U.S. presidential race, the nomination of J.D. Vance, whether it will coalesce more independents and moderates and newer constituencies around the Trump-Vance ticket, or his comments on issues like immigration and abortion, will that shove away those who might be independent-minded, who may have wanted to vote for Trump in the aftermath of the assassination bid on Saturday, especially? Will those voters be chased away? We'll keep a close eye, but that's a wrap. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.
Are keeping him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victim who was killed. He was a father. He was protecting his family from the bullets that were being fired, and he lost his life. God love him. We're also praying for the full recovery of those who were injured, and we're grateful to the Secret Service agents and other law enforcement agencies and individuals who risked their lives literally for our nation. As I said last night, there is no place in America for this kind of violence, or any violence for that matter. An assassination attempt is contrary to everything we stand for as a nation, everything. It's not who we are as a nation. It's not America. And we cannot allow this to happen. Unity is the most elusive goal of all, but nothing is important than that right now, unity. We'll debate and we'll disagree. That's not going to change, but we're going to not lose sight, in fact, who we are as Americans. Look, Vice President Harris and I were just briefed in the Situation Room by my Homeland Security team, including the Director of the FBI, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, the Director of the Secret Service, my Homeland Security Advisor, the National Security Advisor, and we're going to continue to be briefed. The FBI is leading this investigation, which is still in its early stages. We don't yet have any information about the motive of the shooter. We know who he is. I urge everyone, please, don't make assumptions about his motives or his affiliations. Let the FBI do their job and their partner agencies do their job. I'm instructed that this investigation be thorough and swift, and the investigators will have every resource they need to get this done. Look, as this investigation continues, here's what we're going to do. First, Mr. Trump, as a former president and nominee of the Republican Party, already receives a heightened level of security. And I've been consistent in my direction to the Secret Service to provide him with every resource, capability, and protective measure necessary to ensure his continued safety. Second, I've directed the head of the Secret Service to review all security measures for the Republican National Convention, which is scheduled to start tomorrow. And third, I've directed an independent review of the national security yesterday.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
To assess exactly what happened, and we'll share the results of that independent review with the American people as well. And finally, I'll be speaking more about this tonight at greater length from the Oval Office. We must unite as one nation. We must unite as one nation to demonstrate who we are. And so may God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, when you spoke to President Trump yesterday, what did you tell him and what did he tell you, sir?
Mr. President, shifting our campaign strategy, Mr. President. Mr. President, do you regret?
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
My fellow Americans, I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree,
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Day one of the Republican Party convention, Donald Trump made a grand entry with a bandaged ear and secured his party's nomination officially. He's also announced his vice presidential pick.